Hi, everybody. Welcome to English 229 Gothic Literature. My name is Lillian Ruiz, and I am the instructor for the class, our first class. And what I wanted to do in today's first class is to review our syllabus and our course outline so that you can get a sense as to what it is we will be doing over the course of the semester. So I assume you have some familiarity with Moodle or you wouldn't be watching this video. And you can see that at the top of our Moodle page, there is a general section which has several options. The first being a folder for syllabus and other documents. This is where I have uploaded our syllabus and our course outline. I recommend that what you do is you take a hard copy of that because I think it's just easier to work with hard copies. I myself work with hard copies. And you'll see that I've got other folders as well, past class sessions, which is not applicable to us now, but basically what I will do is I will have the current week visible on our Moodle site. And at the ending of the week, I will retire that week into the folder past class sessions so that you can access it over the course of the semester. But basically what you will see on our Moodle page is the current week that we are working with. I also have a section for a discussion forum because we will be utilizing the discussion forum in this online class, which I'll talk a little bit more about in further depth. And then there are two options or optional possibilities. The first is the optional chat. So if you ever wanted to chat with me or you wanted to chat with your classmates or both, you could access that through that link, and the optional Zoom, which will have my Zoom information. So what I'm going to do is to reference first the syllabus, which is in the syllabus and other documents folder, and then I'm going to reference the course outline and just review it with you so that you can get a little bit of a sense as to what the class is about. So you'll see that at the top of the syllabus, you've got just some contact information. My name, for instance, Lillian Ruiz. Most people call me Lillian. I'm pretty informal, but feel free to call me whatever you feel comfortable with. My phone number, so if I'm not in my office, you can leave a message. My email address, which is just my surname with no first initial. So it's Ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu. Because, believe it or not, when I started at GCC, which was in 1993, not everyone had email addresses. So when we were first issued email addresses, they were issued based on surname. And it was only after the fact that people realized that wasn't the best way to issue an email address because ultimately there would be a lot of repetition, so that instituting a first initial would make a lot more sense. So if you ever see somebody who's got an email address which is just their surname, then you know they've been at GCC for quite a while. And my office hours, which are Monday through Thursday, 9 to 10, or by appointment. And that is in North 328A. This is in the Inclusion and Diversity Center, the ID Center, which is a place for anybody who supports the ideals of inclusion and diversity. There's a little study area there. There's a little social seating area, and there's a little kitchenette there. My office is housed there as well, if you ever wanted to talk about the topics of inclusion or diversity. So the text, as you can see, and you probably saw this in the GCC bookstore, that I have the text as recommended because you can use any edition you would like of the text. You do need to have the text, and I am also going to be providing you with links to the text as the semester progresses. So that said, if you turn out wanting to get a particular text, I know that the bookstore has some hard copies, but you can find these online. You can find these through Amazon. And again, you might have your own copies. What I ordered for our bookstore were the paperbacks, which are fairly inexpensive. And the texts are The Best of H.P. Lovecraft, which lists some of H.P. Lovecraft's short stories. And we aren't reading all of them, just a few. Dance Macabre by Stephen King, and that might be a name that you're familiar with, and he's a very famous horror writer, but he also has done analysis about horror and Gothic literature. So that would be something that would be, I hope, of interest to you. And again, we won't be reading the entire text, just pieces. The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, and that actually appeared first as a New York Times bestselling novel before it turned into that iconic film. Stephen King edited a text where the three major Gothic texts, perhaps, of the semester are all included in one book: Frankenstein, Dracula, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Though certainly you can get individual versions of these as well, but it was nice to have them all in one book. The Gold Bug and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe, which gives some of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories. And again, we'll just be reading a few. Great Ghost Stories, another Dover book. I like Dover books because they're very inexpensive. And The Haunting of Hill House. You might know the author, Shirley Jackson, who wrote The Lottery, her perhaps most famous short story. The Haunting of Hill House is a wonderful text, and it is a modern-day ghost story. Night Shift by Stephen King is a collection of some of his early short stories, and again, we won't be reading them all, just a couple. And Supernatural Horror in Literature, another Dover text by H.P. Lovecraft, because H.P. Lovecraft not only wrote short stories, but he also wrote a very long essay, which could be considered to be a short book, about what Gothic is and what supernatural literature is. So those are the readings we'll be doing over the course of the semester. Again, you can use whatever edition you want, and whenever I'm able to find free web links, I will provide those to you over the course of the semester. And I do have a note here that it's assumed that you'll have a good dictionary and thesaurus for reference. Not that I'm expecting you to go out and get these. I know you probably have them loaded onto your computer, but using them as opposed to just having them can be two very different things. So certainly they're useful with your reading and they're useful with your writing, and you will be doing both over the course of the semester. So our course description from the catalog is that this class is a critical and analytic study of the Gothic tradition in both classic and modern supernatural literature, with some attention to film. Students examine the significance of the supernatural horror tale in its larger literary, social, and cultural context. So we'll begin the semester by using some definitions and talking a little bit about what the Gothic tradition is and what supernatural literature is. And you'll notice there is a prerequisite for this class. It's what we call Comp 2. And this is an introduction to literature course, either English 112, 114, or 116 at GCC, or something comparable at another institution. So the idea is that you've already had some experience in reading and writing about literature. So now basically what you can do is use that experience to focus on a particular area of literature. And English 229, in effect, offers a general introduction to the content and technique of Gothic literature through examination of representative short stories, novels, and films. This course emphasizes critical thinking, critical reading, critical writing, a lot of critical in there, and not as in criticism, but as in asking questions and analyzing and interpreting. What toddlers do really well, actually, they're always asking why. So we too will be asking why over the course of the semester. Our learning outcomes: as a result of successfully completing this course, we should be able to appreciate the study of the supernatural horror tale as something that's enjoyable, significant, and relevant. Now, I don't know if many people think of these texts as significant and relevant, but I would argue that they very much are. Not everybody thinks these texts are enjoyable, but I do, and I certainly hope that if you're in this class, you do as well. And I've always said that if you're the type of person to have nightmares because we're going to be reading and writing about monsters, then this probably is not the best fit for you. We're going to become familiar with the major works in the Gothic tradition. We're going to examine the major themes and characteristics of the genre. And we're going to examine the horror tale and other media, film, because film is so closely tied with especially those major Gothic texts of Frankenstein, Dracula, and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. and also to improve oral and written communication skills, which I have on all of my syllabi, not just my English classes. I also teach communication classes, whether it be public speaking or media and popular culture. I even teach a class in horror film. So I have some pretty eclectic tastes. So, procedures. I try to run my online classes similarly to the way that I would run a face to face class. So, if we were meeting in a face to face class, we would be meeting on Monday and Wednesday at 8 a.m. So, I suspect you are not watching this video on Monday at 8 a.m., but I am always going to be posting a video every Monday and every Wednesday at 8 a.m. So I'm going to post a video of myself discussing class material by the time our class would normally meet in person, Monday, Wednesday, 8 a.m. And you have a 48-hour deadline to watch that video, which will be similar to the kind of video I'm doing now. The video would basically cover the content that I would usually discuss in a face-to-face class. And I'll have a corresponding attendance question for you to answer in our class discussion forum. These are usually opinion-based questions, so there are no right or wrongs, and it just counts purely as attendance. And if you need additional time outside of the 48 hours that I've given you, please ask, and I'll be happy to give you an extension. Your answer counts as attendance for that class. And you're not necessarily required to respond to your peers. You're certainly encouraged to, the way you would in a face-to-face class. If you were engaged in a particular class discussion, you might raise your hand and ask a question or answer a question. Certainly you can do that with a discussion forum, but you're not necessarily required to respond to anyone. Because I know that some students learn best by participating, but others learn less by listening, or learn best by listening. So you can decide how much or how little to participate. However, you should read all of the discussion forum responses for optimal learning, and you'll see that I will respond to all of your discussion forum responses. And then any written assignments you have, which will be papers and a final exam, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, you would be sending to my email address, because that's how my grading program works best. Again, my email is ruiz, R-U-I-Z, @gcc.mass.edu. And I ask that you send it via PDF, because again, that's how my grading program works. And then I can return that evaluated work to your email. And I know this is a lot of information. I don't expect you to remember it all. I just wanted to give you an overview before we begin the actual semester. So under course requirements, pretty general, you're expected to complete all the reading and writing assignments by the due date. There will be 2 out-of-class papers assigned, one approximately halfway through the semester. So we would have had a good amount of time to talk about how to write a paper. And the other towards the ending of the semester. In addition, you will also submit those discussion forum responses, and you'll always have a discussion forum question at the ending of each video. And again, you'll have videos posted on Monday and Wednesday morning. And there will be a final exam, which is open book, open notes. And basically, it'll be a series of essay questions from which you can choose, and you can use our classroom materials in order to respond. The Institutional Services Disability Statement, which you might be familiar with if you are a returning student. Greenfield Community College values inclusion and equal access to its programs and activities, and is committed to fostering an environment of respect and full participation. Our goal is to create learning environments that are equitable, inclusive, and welcoming. So if there are aspects of the instruction or design of this course that result in barriers to your inclusion or your accurate assessment or achievement, please notify me as soon as possible. And if you're a student with a disability and you think you need reasonable academic accommodations, please contact the Office of Disability Services to discuss your needs and options. And more information is on the syllabus about their contact information. So that discussion forum I was mentioning earlier, which counts as your attendance, that class activity and discussion is extremely important and can't be made up. So absences and tardiness in the discussion forum will be negatively reflected in your participation grade. While each case is different, anything more than 2 absences could lower your grade. And in fact, excessive absences could even result in failure. You don't need to notify me if you're going to be absent for a particular class, because you can be absent twice in the semester, but do speak with me if you miss several classes. And again, the way that I'm evaluating that is through your response through the discussion forum. Consulting with me, again, you can consult with me during my office hours, or we can make an appointment. And papers, the information I have here about papers are more about formatting than anything else, that they are due on the day specified via PDF again, because that's how my grading program works best, to my email, which is ruiz@gcc.mass.edu. Papers should be typed in double space and 1-inch borders, and your final copy should have a cover page that lists the paper title, your name, the course and section number, my name, and the due date. And we'll talk a little bit more about formatting papers as the semester progresses, but I hope this is familiar from your English 101 class. And what I will be doing is assigning paper assignments through the term, so that I will give you these assignments soon. But again, we're at the very beginning of the semester, so I didn't want to overwhelm you. Paper would be approximately 4 to 5 pages long, but as long as it needs to be in order for you to be able to support a particular position well. And you have the option of revising that first paper, which is due approximately midway through the semester. So once I've evaluated it and returned it to you, you can revise it for a higher grade, if you so elect to do so. Your second paper would be due at the ending of the semester, so you probably wouldn't have time to revise it at the ending of the semester. But if you can get it in early enough, we might be able to negotiate. But the idea is that you've learned how to write a paper in your first writing exercise, so you can just apply that to your second paper. And the papers will be critical papers, so you won't be doing outside research. It'll be your interpretation and analysis of the text or texts that we're reading this semester. So I'm going to skip the section on plagiarism, talk a little bit more about that next class, and go straight to grading. These are approximate percentages. 25% is your participation and discussion form, so answering those discussion forum questions in a timely way. 25% is that essay number 1, which is approximately 4 to 5 pages, which you can rewrite for a higher grade. 25% is essay number 2, which will also be approximately 4 to 5 pages, just on a different text, one of the later texts in the semester. 25%, that final exam, which is open book, open notes, that will be an essay exam, and you'll get to choose. So an A being an excellent, a B good, C satisfactory, and there are letters that follow C, but I prefer not to discuss them, especially on the first day of class. So I'm going to skip the grading criteria that I have there about how a paper will be evaluated, because we can talk about that a little bit later on, and go straight to the course outline. So this is another element that is in your syllabus and other documents folder that I suggest that you print. The course outline basically lists the outline of the dates of what we are going to be doing in class, with a couple of caveats that dates and assignments might be subject to change. These are my best guesses. And reading assignments should be read before the dates indicated below. So what is ideal is that you've already done the reading for whatever is listed for that date. There are a good number of novels in this class, and what's ideal when you're reading a novel is that you have finished it in its entirety, even though we will be talking about it multiple classes. But I know life isn't always ideal, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to give you the entire semester now, so that you can begin reading now. And I don't think this is necessary to state, but I wanted to state it anyway, that pursuant to the character of the genre, some of the assigned material might be considered graphic in nature. So if you look down for week 1, and just because of the way that the academic calendar is, that evening classes are supposed to start on Wednesday, and then day classes are supposed to start on Thursday. And if we were meeting in a face-to-face class, this would be a day class. So our first class, so to speak, would be Monday on the 8th. But I'm well aware that you are probably accessing Moodle earlier than that. But I think of Monday's class, which I would normally post by Monday on the 8th, as what you are watching right now. So this gives you a little bit of time to get ahead. And that means our next class will be posted on Wednesday. September 10th. And to be quite honest with you, I'm going to try to post our classes the night beforehand. But certainly you can expect that by the 10th at 8 a.m. you will have a class posted. And what you should have read for that class, because this is what I'm going to be talking about during that class, is Danse Macabre, and chapters 1 through 3. The first chapter being Invitation to Dance, the second chapter being Tales of the Hook, the third chapter being Tales of the Tarot. And then, and again, I will try to provide you with a web link. I am going to see if they are active and give them to you when it becomes appropriate for our class. You can see that on the 15th of September, we are going to talk about H.P. Lovecraft's Supernatural Horror in Literature, his essay. These are all background materials to prepare us for actually reading the Gothic text. So I think of them as introductory. And I understand people are still getting texts and adding and dropping and all of the rest. Our first major Gothic text begins on the 17th. And this is Frankenstein. And we've got 4 classes devoted to it, so we've got quite a bit of time to talk about it. But as I indicated, what would be ideal, though the world isn't always ideal, is that by the 17th, you would have read Frankenstein in its entirety, so that when we move forward and you begin, or we begin talking about our next text, which happens to be Edgar Allan Poe, you've already read Edgar Allan Poe. And while we're talking about Poe, you are at home reading the next text so that you're always ahead. But after Frankenstein, we move to Edgar Allan Poe, and the short stories we're going to be reading: The Fall of the House of Usher, The Mask of the Red Death, The Telltale Heart, and The Black Cat. And then we move, after a couple of classes with Poe, to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And you can see that I've got dates that indicate holidays when we wouldn't be meeting. And then we've got one of my favorite classes, and this will be on the 29th, our Halloween class, which is right before Halloween. And this is around the time that your first paper would be due, but I encourage early papers. I have what I call rolling deadlines, that once I start talking about the requirements for the paper, you can hand in the paper at any point. But certainly the sooner you hand in the paper, the better off everybody is. And I chose this date, the 29th, because it's midway through the semester, so that by the midpoint of the semester, you would want to have some feedback, though you don't necessarily have to have feedback by this point, but it makes a lot of sense that you would. So you can see that after Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, we've got Dracula, and then again, our Halloween class that I don't want to talk too much about. Hopefully it'll be a surprise. We've got several classes devoted to Dracula, and then we go to H.P. Lovecraft and some of his short stories, specifically The Outsider, Pickman's Model, and The Dunwich Horror. And then we move to Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. This puts us in November, and we've got multiple classes devoted to that. In December, we move to The Exorcist, and we've got multiple classes devoted to that. And then finally, we end our semester with Night Shift and some of Stephen King's short stories, specifically Jerusalem's Lot and One for the Road. And by the time we get to the ending of the semester, it should make sense to you as to why we're reading those specific stories, as well as Stephen King's foreword for Night Shift, which is very similar to some of the comments he makes in Danse Macabre. And then we end on the 17th with our final exam. What I will be doing is I will be posting our final exam on the 17th at 8 a.m. and you would have 24 hours in which to complete that final. So it would be due on the 18th. If you were taking the final in a face-to-face class, you'd have 2 to 3 hours to complete the final. But since it's an online class, I'll give you 24 hours to do it. Not that I expect you to spend 24 hours on it. And that would be the very last day that you could hand in paper number 2. Early papers encouraged, of course. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of what it is that the semester is going to be about. So certainly if you've got any questions or concerns, let me know. And the attendance question that I have for us, and this is not going to be due until Wednesday of next week, because again, as far as I'm concerned, class begins on Monday, but things are a little bit odd with our starting point for this semester, so I wanted to make sure that this was posted early. But your attendance question is going to ask you to introduce yourself to the class. Feel free to upload pictures or audio, but not required. And then what we can do next class is talk a little bit about the pieces of the syllabus that I didn't get to and begin talking about what is Gothic literature and supernatural literature. So I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and we will continue on next week. Take care. Bye-bye.